So please open up Luke's Gospel, chapter 14, if you've got it with you. Here's a really short summary of the Gospel. Jesus came to live a perfect life, die a sacrificial death, and rise again from the grave to offer life. Really short, really succinct. If that's what Jesus is all about, then why is Luke giving us another Sabbath story healing, another fight with the Pharisees? We've been here. Got some deja vu moments this week where I thought, I'm sure I've preached this passage before, and we have preached this passage before. In chapter 13 is something very, very similar. Dealing with Pharisees, there's a healing. There's questions about compassion and their legalism. So why is Luke spending time here again? If the nutshell of the gospel is his life and death and resurrection, why another scrap with the Pharisees? Why do we have another encounter with these bits and pieces of advice of how to act at parties? Been invited to any parties lately? Jesus got some advice here of how to act in parties, what seat to take and who you should invite. At a glance, that's what our passage is about. It seems quite a long way away from the gospel, doesn't it? It seems quite a long way away from the cross and resurrection of Jesus. There's a few reasons for it, I think. Jesus is heading towards Jerusalem. Luke's made that clear. We're on this journey to Jerusalem. Christ's face is fixed upon it. And as he is, the confrontation between the Pharisees, the religious elite, and Jesus is mounting. It's gaining. It's getting bigger and more fierce. He knows Jerusalem will be the place of his death. He's made that clear. The climax of his earthly work and ministry. So Luke is showing us how it's mounting, how the pressure is mounting, how the situation is getting worse. But Luke is also doing more as he does that. At the same time, he's showing how Jesus unmasks the religion of the day. He peels it back and shows the hypocrisy that's in front of him. The people who looked the part. The people who everyone thought had all the right answers, ticked all the right boxes, had even the right behavior. Jesus is peeling back the mask, recovering an unchanged heart. That outwardly they look the part, but inwardly there's something rotten there. Jesus comes to bring something vital, something real, something new. Something that changes the person from inside out. It does come to the outside. It does impact behaviors. We'll see that. This is a practical sermon, giving us practical instruction on how to live. But that practicality, that behavior, that outworking comes from within. It isn't simply aping or pretending, masking an unchanged heart. So this morning, from this episode at a Pharisee's house, I want to bring you 10 signs of true religion. I'm afraid that does mean this is a sermon with 10 points. Some of them will be much shorter than others. 10 signs of true religion. I want to place you in that room. I want to place you at this party, at this meal. You've also been invited. You've also turned up, and you're seeing Jesus peel off the mask. These people that no one else speaks against, these Pharisees, these religious leaders. No one else dares speak against them, but Jesus is going to peel it off uncomfortably, awkwardly, painfully. And in the same time, he's going to show that his life, what he's calling people to follow, is real, vital, and different. I'm conscious that some people in this room don't like the word religion. Some even perhaps when they explain their faith would say, well, I'm not religious, I'm a person of faith. My faith is all about a relationship with Jesus, not about a religion and rules, and I understand why we might use that language. So just for clarity, I'm using the word religion simply as what we profess to believe and practice. That's all I really mean by religion today. So what we profess to believe and practice. 10 signs is a lot to hold on to. So really I want you to leave with verse 11 in your minds. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's right in the middle of our passage from verse 1 to 14. And you'll see that a number of these tests, a number of these signs of true religion are rooted in this idea of humbling ourselves and not exalting ourselves or lifting ourselves up. Right, let's see how we get on. Number one, true religion responds to the life and ministry of Jesus. There's no getting away from this. As you read the Gospels, Jesus is putting himself at the very center of life. Well, that seems arrogant, doesn't it? If this is the first time that you're hearing about Jesus, or as you explain Jesus to your friends or work colleagues, his claims can sound arrogant, and that can put people off. It certainly puts the Pharisees off. It puts their backs up. For them, the way Jesus spoke about himself was blasphemous. He was making himself out to be equal with God. And that's because he was equal with God. It's not arrogant for God to put himself at the center of the universe, because he is the center of the universe. He is the creator. He is the beginning. And it's not arrogant then for Jesus to announce himself as God's king, as the key figure in human history, because he is God's king. What is key then in our lives is our response to him. I've already mentioned that Luke 13 verse 10 has a very similar account. So why is Luke repeating this? These Pharisees seem to approach the matter in exactly the same way. And I think that's the point. They're in a very similar place on a very similar day. A very similar situation arises. It's a Sabbath and somebody needs healing. The Pharisees are exactly the same, aren't they? They're unchanged. They've had their hypocrisy peeled off once before. Christ has said, rules are more important to you than compassion. This day is about people and God blessing people's lives, and I'm blessing people's lives and you're picking holes at me. They're untouched. They're unchanged. They're unmoved. Jesus won this argument before, and they've returned to their losing position. They've returned to their hypocrisy. It shows how deeply entrenched their opposition was. And so it might be repetitious for us to be in a very similar account, but it's showing us what we're like. We're repetitious in our sin, aren't we? We go back to the same mindsets. We go back to the same failings. How many of you were here for that sermon? How many of you have forgotten that sermon? And so just like those Pharisees who've had their sin uncovered and haven't responded well to Jesus, well, you're in the same place, aren't you? How repetitious is your rejection? How repetitious is your sliding away from vital religion, from true religion? What matters most in this moment is what we make of Jesus. Number two, true religion means you stop watching Jesus and humble yourself to serve him. Luke tells us, doesn't he, that on this Sabbath, when he went to dine in the house of the ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. Who do you watch carefully? Who have you got your eyes on? Are you fans of something? Fans watch carefully, don't they? They're on the edge of their seat as they watch their team in the final. They're watching carefully. But these aren't looking at Jesus like that. They're a bit more like a sniper, a hunter, watching carefully to kill, watching carefully to catch out. They want Jesus dead. They want him to fail. They want him to be publicly shamed. There's a hint here. A couple of commentators went for it. There's a hint here that this is a setup. The word behold there, that perhaps this disabled man was brought in by the Pharisees. Jesus, come to my house for tea. Come and spend some time here on the Sabbath. Right, get that guy. Put him right in front of Jesus. Let's see if he does it again. Let's see if he's going to break the Sabbath again. We're not sure. We can't be convinced. That behold perhaps points out, is perhaps Luke giving us a bit of a wink, that is what's going on. But we can be fixed in our opposition to Jesus, can't we? We can be watching for holes, for gaps, for opposition. The last few weeks on Sunday nights, we've been going through the historical claims of the gospel accounts. And some of you engaging with that might be listening and thinking, no, it's still not good enough for me. I'm still not convinced. I'm still looking for objections. And actually, it isn't the data, it isn't the evidence, it isn't what we've gone through that you've got problems with. It's just Jesus. It's just him and his claims. I haven't got space for him. You haven't got a counter-argument. You haven't got another suggestion. You haven't got another interpretation. You just don't want him. You're just resisting bending the knee. And these Pharisees are exalting themselves above Jesus. And there's no true religion like that. You must humble yourself and serve him. Some of these Pharisees are perhaps not the ones in this account, but certainly Pharisees of this period eventually came to put their trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. When the gospel is proclaimed later in Acts, we hear of Pharisees coming on board, putting their confidence in Christ. That's a 180-degree turn, isn't it? From opposition to submission, from hostility, from being against something to devotion, from plotting his death to giving him their lives. True religion means you stop watching Jesus, but humble yourself to serve him. Number 3, true religion is not elevating yourself by mere rule keeping. The issues at stake here is on Jesus healing on the Sabbath. The question is, will Jesus heal on this day of rest? Now, we spent quite a bit of time on this last time. Jesus is unveiling that their rules are so much more important to them than actually compassion. They don't love people. They love their rule keeping. The question is, will Jesus exert himself? Will he express effort? Will he work on the Sabbath? And you can see Jesus speaks to them clearly twice. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? And they're silent. It's a brilliant question. It cuts their hypocrisy right down the middle. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? There's no way of answering that question. They either say yes and they're on Jesus' side, or they say no and they're against this man. They're expressing that they're against this man being healed. Straight after Jesus heals the man, he makes clear what he thinks of his own question. And then Jesus says, which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on the Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out? These Pharisees are so focused on rule keeping, so focused on performance, on appearance, on how they look. They've forgotten what the Sabbath was all about. Their rule keeping, their strict observance is now really all of that their religion boils down to. It's godless. They've taken the law and they've removed God who gave them the law. They're using that law now to justify themselves, to elevate themselves, to lift themselves up from the masses. They're justifying themselves by their own impeccable standards. We all do this, don't we? We all point to our own achievements. We all are quick to call out other people's failures. We compare ourselves to others. We exalt self. We promote ourselves. A true religion, when the gospel takes root of us, when we come to know Christ, that behavior must diminish. Like John the Baptist, we must be saying again and again, he must increase, I must decrease. Less of me, more of him. Number 4, true religion means displaying compassion. Displaying compassion. What Jesus uncovered by removing their mask is that the rule keeping is just rule keeping. Their hearts are cold towards human suffering and pain. If they have just brought this individual in as a bit of a sideshow, as a bit of a trap to trick Jesus, then they've got no real interest in the individual. They've got no interest in his pain, in his disability, in his hardship. Even if they haven't brought him in for that trick and that trap, he just happens to be there just at the right time, just at the right moment, then again their interest in him, their watching of Jesus is all about a doctrinal debate, all about catching someone out. Jesus tells them they're willing to exert themselves for things that they love. Their child is in a well, they're reaching out. They're not checking what day of the week it is. They're not checking their own laws to see if they're able to do that. They're just reaching out in compassion, in love. I'll save you, you're mine. I'll bring you in. I'm not leaving you there. If it's their ox, then it's of benefit to them. It helps them. It feeds them. It's a tool. And so they're going to save their ox. They're going to work hard, even on the Sabbath, to bring that ox out of the pit, out of difficulty. But for this man, they've got no compassion. There's no benefit to them, no connection to them. And so they use him. They use him for a trick. They use him for a spectacle. Jesus' ministry, on the other hand, is one that displays love and compassion, well aware of what's going on, well aware of the evil intent of the hearts around them. Jesus does focus on the man. Jesus draws near him. Verse 4, then he took him. Jesus does center attention on this man. It seems that language speaks of an embrace. Jesus taking hold of him, making clear that he hasn't just been healed, but that Jesus healed him, that Jesus cares for him, that Jesus wants him. He took him and healed him and sent him away. The true religion of Jesus isn't complicated like the Pharisees' life. As soon as you start putting a mask on, it's complicated, isn't it? As soon as you start engaging with this sort of hypocrisy where there's a disconnect by what you tell the world you actually are and the reality going on behind the mask, that's complicated, that's hard. You've got to keep that going. It's exhausting. But Jesus' life and ministry is simple. He loves, has compassion towards people. Driven by compassion, he loves, he moves forward, he heals. Number 5. True religion observes God's rest for our own good and God's glory. I've already said that this section is all tied up with the Sabbath. It was a key battleground for the Pharisees and for Jesus. Jesus proclaiming himself as Lord of the Sabbath, and the Pharisees really using this as a law that Jesus seems to be willing to break. And so they're portraying him, caricaturing him as a lawbreaker, as a godless man. And Jesus is using this opportunity to say, this is what the law was all about. The danger for us in this debate is that we really quickly side with Jesus and go, yeah, boo on the rules. Rules are bad. We don't see the issue of the day. We don't see what the Pharisees were passionate about. They were hypocrites, but there was something right that they were focused on. The Pharisees made the mistake of making too much of the Sabbath, honoring the day but forgetting about God, keeping the rules but neglecting that vital relationship with their Creator. I think we're much more in danger of the opposite mistake. Rather than making too much of the Sabbath, we make too little of it. Rather than honoring the day, we ignore the day. Ends up in the same result. We forget about God. We can ignore the rest and neglect the relationship. I came across this stat in one commentary. You don't get many stats in commentaries, and I quite like stats. So this one caught my attention. I hope the maths is correct. My maths is appalling, so I spent quite a lot of time thinking, is that really right? A believer of 70 years of age has had 10 years of Sabbath rest. Amazing. 10 years of Sabbath rest. A believer of 70 years of age has had 10 years of Sabbath rest. I went to the beach yesterday, meeting some friends who were down visiting on holiday, and as it's kind of awkward because they were waving at us to come over and say hello to them, and then in between them and where we were, I saw another friend who I hadn't seen since I'd been in school with, so I kind of prioritized this friend to talk to him. So I had a bit of a chat with him. It turns out he lives in Grangetown. It was nice to reconnect. He was telling me all about being on furlough. He's still on furlough currently, and he said something that really struck me. He said, I didn't really know how much I needed to stop. Furlough for him had been an enforced stop. Career going well. Career going at a pace. Pressure building. Enjoying work, but work still taking its toll. And this enforced break had given him a reset. He wanted to go back to work, was keen to go back to work, looking for the green light, ready to go. But yet had needed a re-evaluation. I've heard that before. I've heard other people say that about furlough. I've heard people on the news say how many in our society have been able to re-evaluate that work-life balance in their lives. Now, I'm conscious there'll be different opinions in this room about what we think of holy days, what we think of Sabbaths, what we think of the lines of continuity and discontinuity from the Old Testament and into the New Testament. We haven't got time to open that up today. But I'd suggest that any Bible-believing believer will see that there's this pattern of 1 day in 7. That God is giving us something there. He's given us a pattern of regular rest, a time to stop, a regular reminder of nothing else, that we're not God, that we're not all-powerful, we're not all-knowing, we're not eternal, that we can't do everything, and that the world doesn't end if we stop working. He gives us a weekly opportunity to humble ourselves and exalt Him. He gives us a weekly opportunity to come back to ground zero and remind ourselves of great gospel truths, of His love, of His power to save us, of His eternal purposes, of His calling on our own lives. Are we wasting that day? Have we reduced that day to 1.5 hours, if Andrew keeps the time, on a Sunday morning? Does Sunday evening gathering get a looking? Do we even think about attending? Does God get a look in? In this day of rest, in this gift that He's giving you, does He get a look in? Are you starving yourself? I'm not banging the drum for church attendance. I love you, and God loves you, and He's given you this gift. And it harms you to neglect it. Are you lacking vitality because you lack time with the Lord? A believer of 70 years of age has 10 years of Sabbath rest. This is about as far as my maths went. We've got some pictures, I think. There you go. That's 1 day a week. 1 day a week. This pattern of 1 day in 7 to return to the Lord, to gather with His people, to sit under the Word, to feed yourself, to commune with God, to show hospitality, to communicate the faith. Now, all of that can happen on every day of the week. But there's a pattern here. There's a rest. There's a breaking off. There's a stopping. 4 days a month. Andy's reading. Very good. 4 days a month. 1 day a week is a gift. Don't neglect it. 4 days a month is a pattern. Establish it. Week after week, month after month. Establish that pattern in your life. 52 days a year. It's as far as it goes. Don't worry, we're not going to 70 years. Don't worry. 52 days a year, that's 7 weeks of rest. It's a rest. Enjoy it. This is the one I didn't have time for. Cutting and pasting was taking a while. 520 days a decade. 1.5 years every 10 years. It's an investment. Make that investment. 3,640 days a lifetime. It's 10 years. That's a legacy. That's you passing it on to the next generation. That's you cementing something in the lives of the people who watch you, your children or your neighbors or your church family. It's a legacy. People see it. People see that investment over a lifetime. They see the difference that that Sabbath honoring, that 1 day in 7 honoring does. The benefit it gives, the focus it gives, the balance it brings. Number 6, true religion means coming to Jesus for healing. I think if we were in that room, if we were there at that meal, this would be the talking point. The Pharisees, of course, are talking about the laws and law breaking, but this would be the talking point for most people there. The man was healed. A man with dropsy, Luke tells us, excess fluid dominating and debilitating his body. And he's healed in a moment by Jesus. His life is changed. His misery is removed. We're so used to Jesus healing, aren't we, that we're not surprised when it happens. And so we miss the glory of this picture. We miss the picture of this individual life completely transformed. We miss seeing Christ's compassion in action. He doesn't just fight off the opposition. He doesn't just remove the mask of hypocrisy, but he shows compassion. And seeing this picture, we see a picture of what Jesus can do to any of our lives. The healing that he can bring. That's the beginning of true religion. Finding healing in Jesus. Dropsy or no dropsy, there's a heart condition within us. Not too much water in our bodies, there's too much sin in our hearts, there's corruption within. And we need a doctor, we need a physician, we need someone who can fix us and heal us. And in recognizing the sickness, we go to the Savior. Number 7, a true religion is an invitation, not a qualification. In verse 8, Jesus moves on to those who are in the feast. And we'll see in next week, God willing, this idea of the feast expands. It's a growing illustration. It's one he applies in different ways. He's using his surroundings to explain truth. And the idea is of a feast, of a wedding feast. Mainly, this week he's thinking about our self-perception, our exalting of ourselves, placing ourselves above others, and then who we offer kindness to. We're going to go on to those elements in a minute, but let's first just recognize that Jesus is using this feast as a picture that shines a light on human interactions, these horizontal relationships, how we relate to other people that we meet, but also on our vertical relationship. Christ is always also talking about the invitation that God is extending to men and women. God is extending to anyone in this room to come and sit at his table. You think you're honored to go and sit with the leading Pharisee? Well, God is inviting you to sit at his table. It's part of the wonder of the gospel that people like you and me, people with dropsy of the heart, heavy hearts, sinful hearts, can be made right, can be invited to dine with God. How does God do this? Well, first look at the manger. Look at the Son of God coming down and becoming one of us. The incarnation. God the Son taking on flesh and living in our place. That's how God makes a way for people like us to sit at the table. That Christ comes to sit at our table. Christ draws near to us. He comes close and sits with sinners. He comes close and sits with religious hypocrites. He comes close. He points to sin, but points to himself as the solution. So see the manger. See the wonder of that miracle, of God's love in sending his Son to this world. But also, don't stay at the manger. Go to the cross. Not just his incarnation, but his substitution, his placing himself in our place. It'll be one of the main themes of this evening as we consider the meaning of Christ's cross, is that he's a substitute. He's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. This is how God can invite people like us to dine, because we're clothed in his life. We're washed by his blood. Number 8, true religion transforms self-perception. We stop elevating ourselves. Not only have the Pharisees been watching Jesus, he has been watching them. Verse 7, now he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor. Jesus spotted them. He's seen them. The picture seems to be that there's a feast, there's a meal, there's an invitation, and then there's honored seats at the table, and there'll be one top seat. There'll be one seat for the honored guest. And they're all nudging their way. They're all putting themselves towards the top end of the table, putting themselves in the top seats. But there comes a point when all the seats are taken, where all the comparing and the toing and froing is over and the seats are taken. And if you're in the wrong seat, and someone who is more elevated than you, someone who is more honored than you turns up, you don't go necessarily back to your rightful place. You're off. You might not even have a seat. The spaces have gone. And so you're in a worse position than you were to begin with. These individuals are elevating themselves. And Jesus says, no, don't do that. Don't act like that. Take the lower seat. And if someone's going to honor you, don't let it be yourself. Let it be someone else. Let someone else come and take you from a humble position and lift you to a more elevated position. Let them honor you. Don't honor yourself. Now, we need to be careful. There is a way of reading this where Jesus is giving sort of self-help tips to social elevation. If you really want to get to the best seats, sit on the low seats. It's the fast track to getting in the best seats. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's talking about their attitude. They're walking into a room and assuming that that's the seat that they belong in. And Jesus is saying, no, walk into a room and assume that you're of nothing, of no value. Humble yourself. It's an outlook. As you walk in the room, if you're anything like me, your natural work is to qualify yourself. How do I compare with everyone here? Have they got more hair than me? Are they in better shape? Thanks, Tony. That was a nod for anyone who's that side of the camera. Are they in better shape than me? Do they earn more than me? Have they got more power than me, more clout to me? Are their kids better behaved than my kids? We compare ourselves. We're doing it all of the time. Are they better at listening to sermons? Are they falling asleep yet? And Jesus is saying, walk into the room knowing who you are. Being conscious of your sin. Being conscious of how God has met you in that sin. And he has elevated you. So don't go into these situations looking to elevate yourself because you're a child of God. You've been made something through the gospel that you could never make yourself. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Number 9, true religion doesn't value people by how they can benefit you. It's the second point that Jesus goes on to, isn't it? First talks about this hustling for position, for the right seat in the house. And then he talks about who they're inviting, who they're bringing in. It could be a bit of a joke here, because they have invited someone lame. They have invited someone crippled. They have brought in the very person that Jesus wanted them to bring in, but they brought him in for all the wrong reasons. Part of the pile-up of seats that Jesus is watching is because perhaps they're all on a very similar layer of society, so it's hard for them to work out quite who is the most honored guest. They're all Pharisees. They're all top religious leaders. They're all from the same echelon. They're all from the same, cut from the same cloth. So it's hard to work out who's the best. Hospitality for them has become self-serving. It's become, how do they present themselves to the wider society? It's about receiving back what you have given. And Jesus says true religion isn't like that. It isn't getting what you can out of people, but giving what you can to people. I want you to do a little thought experiment. I want you to think about hospitality in your own life. I want you to think about the last 10 people that you showed hospitality to. Now, our houses have been sort of off limits, haven't they? So we've been a bit restricted. So that can be buying a drink, buying an ice cream, sharing a meal, giving a lift. The last 10 people who you served in this way, how many of them were very close friends and family, people you feel very natural and comfortable around? There's the bite. There's the challenge. Jesus isn't saying we can't be kind to these people and we can't enjoy hospitality and we can't buy our brother, our sister, our cousin, our nephew, our niece an ice cream. But he's saying he expects more from his followers. He expects to see love cross these social economic boundaries, to bridge cultural barriers, to withstand awkward silences, even unpleasant smells or people taking advantage of your kindness. He expects to see that on display amongst his people. Display love like God has displayed love to you, to those who can't pay it back. True religion does that. 10, and final. True religion frees you to make all sorts of friends. This is a bit of a zoom out one. Notice that Jesus is practicing what he preaches, isn't he? As we said at the beginning, as we had the reading, Jesus is at the house of one of his avowed enemies. He knew their agenda. He knew what they were about. He's able to interpret their thoughts. He's received an invite from them, and he's willing to dine with them. Again, it's a pointer to the simplicity of Christ, the simplicity of his mission. You want me to come for food? Yeah, I'll come for food. He's not a fool. He knows what's going on. He accepts the invite. With the outcast or with the elite, Jesus dined, had fellowship, sat down. He displays friends to serve us, to benefit us, to bless us. We look to God eternally for those blessings. You will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. Look ahead for your reward. Don't host a family on Wednesday if they're going to host you the next Wednesday. Don't let the following week be your reward. Don't have a barbecue in your house because you really fancy a barbecue in their house. No, serve self-sacrificially. God will bless you. Don't worry about that. And so it opens up your friendships because they no longer have to better you or improve you. How have you done this spiritual health check of true over false religion? Preaching it, I felt a mask be lifted off my own face. As I've prepared, I've been very conscious of my own hypocrisy, of my own lack of compassion, of my own comparing to others, of my own focus on rules rather than on relationship with the Lord. As I've looked back, I've thought there are people in my life who clearly have honored the Sabbath and enjoyed God on those days. And I'm lacking. My life is lacking because of my Sundays. It's very easy to put on that mask, to pretend, to not look at the mirror, to not assess ourselves in this way. It's such a foolish performance, isn't it? Masks are silly. Religious masks are the most silly. God sees right through it, and he wants none of it. He wants us to come as we are and to be transformed from inside out, to receive what we couldn't earn, and to live a life rejoicing in service of our new King. Amen.